You're on a steel deck at night, and the air tastes like salt and burned fuel. Somewhere above you, a radar spins with a low mechanical hum, like a giant fan cutting the dark into slices. Your headphones crackle with clipped voices, and then it hits. Not one target, not 10 dozens. Tiny blips multiplying fast, like sparks escaping a bonfire. You can almost feel the ship tense under your feet, as if the metal itself knows what's coming. A warning tone starts. Sharp, impatient. Then a second tone stacks on top, and a third. The combat system isn't asking, can we stop them? It's asking, which ones do we stop? Off your right side, a launcher door snaps open with a hiss, and a missile erupts into the sky. White fire, roaring heat, a punch of sound you feel in your ribs. It's beautiful for half a second, and then the sick part of the story lands. That one missile might cost $2 million. The drone it's hunting might cost $5,000. And tonight, the enemy doesn't need to sink you. They just need to make you shoot. This episode is about the most brutal weapon in modern war. Not a drone, not a missile, but math. Because at sea, you don't fight until you get scared. You fight until you run out of ammunition, time, or clarity. And swarms. Cheap drones, decoys, and good enough flying bombs attack the one thing every warship has less of than steel: inventory. Here's the core idea. When a defender spends $2 million to kill a $5,000 threat, the attacker wins, even if every drone dies. They're not trading drones for ships. They're trading drones for your magazine depth, your attention, your radar tracks, your interceptors, and your confidence. And in the background, there's a second trap most people miss. Reloading at sea isn't like reloading in a video game. It can be hours, days, or not until you return to port. So the real battle isn't the first wave. It's what happens after the first wave, when your ship is alive and suddenly underarmed. Let's make the math feel real with a simple image. Imagine you're guarding a house with 8 fire extinguishers. Now imagine someone throws paper airplanes at your window, dozens of them. Each airplane is cheap, but your extinguishers are not unlimited. If you use 1 extinguisher per airplane, you can win the first minute and lose the next 10. That's ammo economics. A warship is exactly that. A floating house with a limited number of extinguishers for the worst fires. Some are short range, some are medium range, some are long range, but none of them are infinite, and every launch is a decision you can't unmake. Now add the ocean. The ocean doesn't let you call a truck to restock. The ocean laughs at your supply chain, and the attacker knows it. So they design the attack to force the defender to overspend, overreact, and overcommit. That's why the cheapest drone is often the most expensive threat. Here's the twist. The swarm's job isn't always to hit you. Sometimes it's to make you shoot the wrong thing at the wrong time, until the real threat arrives when your launchers are half empty and your operators are exhausted. To understand why this works, you have to picture a warship as a layer cake of defenses. Outer layer, long-range sensors and missiles. Middle layer, medium-range interceptors. Inner layer, point defense, rapid guns, and short-range missiles. And inside all of it, electronic warfare, decoys, and the crew's ability to make clean decisions under stress. On paper, layered defense looks unbeatable. In reality, each layer has 2 hidden limits: rate and magazine. Rate is how many targets you can engage per minute. Magazine is how many shots you have before you're empty. A swarm attacks both at the same time. And there's a third limit. Quieter, but deadlier. Attention. Your system is tracking, classifying, prioritizing. If you flood it with maybes, you force it to gamble. That's where cost exchange becomes a weapon. The attacker spends pennies to create dilemmas worth millions. So the question becomes, when 40 objects appear, and you can only confidently classify 12, do you shoot early and spend big, or wait and risk one slipping through. Swarms weaponize that hesitation. They turn your best missiles into expensive coin flips. Now let's talk numbers, without getting lost in spreadsheets. If an attacker can launch 100 drones at $5,000 each, that's $500,000 total. If the defender responds with 100 interceptors at $2 million each, that's $200 million. The attacker just forced a 400-to-1 spending disadvantage. Even if those prices vary, the shape of the curve stays the same. The attacker's cost per threat can be tiny, while the defender's cost per shot can be huge. And the defender can't always choose cheaper shots, because cheap shots have limits: range, accuracy, weather, clutter, reaction time. This is where the swarm gets smart. It doesn't present one clean target. It presents a mess: low flyers, split directions, staggered timing. Some emit signals, some stay silent. Some look like missiles, some look like birds, until the last seconds. And every confusion pushes the defender toward the safest answer: fire the expensive interceptor. But there's a catch. If you fire expensive missiles at cheap drones, you don't just lose money. You lose the ability to stop a faster, deadlier weapon that shows up after. The true cost isn't dollars, it's options. Here's the problem most drone swarm videos skip. A warship doesn't fight a drone. It fights a kill chain. Detection, tracking, identification, decision, engagement, assessment, repeat. And every link in that chain has latency, tiny delays that stack into dangerous seconds. A $5K drone can attack the kill chain instead of the hull. It can force radar to track too many objects. It can push operators into overload. It can make the system prioritize the wrong thing. And if it carries a jammer, or if the swarm includes jammers, then the kill chain starts to stutter like a car engine starved of fuel. This is why the best swarm doesn't fly straight at the ship like a movie villain. It behaves like a pickpocket crew. One distracts you, one blocks your view, one makes you look the wrong way, and the one you never notice is the one that actually hurts you. And in ammo economics, distraction has a price tag. The defender's missiles don't just cost money. They cost time, thermal load, system wear, and decision bandwidth. The attacker is buying your fatigue at a discount. Let's zoom in to the moment of choice. You see 20 tracks. Your system says, threats probable, but probable isn't certain. If you wait, one might be a real anti-ship missile, and you've just gambled your ship on patience. If you shoot, you might spend millions to kill foam and plastic. Either way, the attacker wins something. This is the cost trap. The defender's safest behavior is expensive. The defender's cheapest behavior is risky. A smart swarm designs itself to keep you inside that trap for as long as possible. Now add a simple constraint. You might only have 8 interceptors in the ready launcher for that range bracket. 8. That number becomes a heartbeat in the room. Every launch is a thump. 7 left, 6 left, 5 left, and the enemy knows exactly when your posture changes. Because once you're low, you stop taking clean shots. You start saving. And the moment you start saving, the attacker shifts from drain to break. Saturation isn't just many drones. It's many decisions arriving faster than humans and machines can resolve them. Think of it like a busy restaurant kitchen. Even if the chefs are world-class, if 200 orders come in at once, quality collapses. Not because the chefs forgot how to cook, but because the system is overwhelmed. A warship's combat system is a kitchen under pressure. Each track is an order. Each engagement is a recipe. The swarm wins by forcing the kitchen into chaos, timing, angles, altitude changes, and uncertainty. And here's the nasty part. The swarm can be built to exploit your layered defense. If you have expensive long-range missiles, it gives you long-range maybe threats. If you rely on mid-range interceptors, it stays inside that bracket. If you trust point defense, it attacks in clutter and low altitude where your sensors are least comfortable. So layered defense becomes layered spending. The attacker is basically saying, pick which layer you want to bankrupt. Now we step into the darkest room of this story: electronic warfare, the blindfold war. Because the swarm's most valuable payload might not be explosives, it might be noise, interference, confusion, a cheap jammer that makes a $2B ship feel like it's fighting with fogged-up glasses. Imagine trying to catch mosquitoes in a pitch-black room while someone blasts a strobe light in your face. Your hands still work, your reflexes still exist, but your perception is broken. That's what EW does. It attacks your ability to know what's real. In that environment, the defender tends to spend big again because expensive missiles feel like certainty. But in heavy EW, even expensive shots can miss or be wasted on decoys. So the cost trap deepens. You spend more while your confidence drops. And here's the twist that changes everything. Sometimes the swarm isn't trying to sink the ship. It's trying to blind it. So another weapon, maybe a real missile, maybe a submarine, maybe an aircraft, gets a clean window. The swarm is the curtain. The killer walks in behind it. Decoys make this even worse. A decoy doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be plausible at the wrong moment. A cheap flying object that mimics the radar signature of something scarier is like a fake alarm in your house. After the third false alarm, you either stop responding or you respond too aggressively and exhaust yourself. Both outcomes help the attacker. This is why cheap weapons are rising. They're not competing with your best interceptor in accuracy. They're competing with it in psychology. They're weaponized doubt. Picture the operator's world. Screens full of tracks, radios alive, the ship vibrating with machinery, the smell of hot electronics, the dryness in your mouth when you realize your shot counter is dropping. The swarm is attacking that human layer too, because humans are the final decision makers when the system is uncertain. And the attacker knows one thing about humans under pressure. They prefer the option that feels safest right now, even if it's devastating later. That's exactly what the cost trap is built to trigger. So how do fleets survive this without turning every engagement into a financial suicide mission? They shift from one perfect interceptor to many cheap answers. Not one golden bullet, a toolbox. Because the real goal is to flip the exchange ratio back in your favor. Think of it like home security. If every time a squirrel hits your window you have to call a SWAT team, you'll go broke. You need cheap sensors, cheap alarms, cheap deterrents, and you save the SWAT team for the real intruder. In naval terms, that means cheaper interceptors, better short-range options, smarter decoys, stronger EW, and emerging systems like lasers or microwave weapons that trade electricity for shots. Not because lasers are magic, but because they change the economics. They turn ammo into power. But there's a catch again. None of these are universal. Weather matters, range matters, maintenance matters, integration matters. So the new fleet survival strategy isn't get one new weapon. It's build a new kill chain that stays calm under overload. Now we connect this to your Season 1 binge design. EP3 showed layered defense and saturation failure. EP4 showed EW, the blindfold. EP5 is where the audience finally feels the engine underneath. Economics drives tactics. Because when costs are upside down, you're forced into bad tactics. You shoot too early. You shoot too late. You hold fire and get hit. You fire and go empty. You protect one ship and expose another. The whole fleet posture bends around magazine depth like gravity. Here's a simple mental model. Every ship has a defense budget per hour. Not money, shots. Once you burn it, you're living on luck. A swarm tries to burn your budget fast. Fleet survival means stretching that budget by using the cheapest reliable response first and reserving the premium responses for the premium threats. And here's the rehook. The fleet that wins won't be the one with the most expensive missiles. It'll be the one with the best priority ladder. A calm, ruthless order of engagement that doesn't panic when the sky fills up. So what does a priority ladder look like in plain language? Step 1. Reduce uncertainty. If you can classify targets faster, you spend less. That means better sensors, better fusion, better track management, and training that doesn't collapse under noise. Step 2. Cheap shots first, when safe. Soft kill jamming, deception, before hard kill, missiles, if the threat profile allows it. Short-range guns for leakers, not for the whole swarm, and decoys to pull weapons off your ship's true location. Step 3. Keep the kill chain alive. Protect your radar. Protect your data links. Protect your operator's clarity. Because once you're blind, your expensive missiles become expensive guesses. Step 4. Fleet-level thinking. A single ship doesn't have to do everything. Distribute sensors and shooters. Share tracks. Create overlapping bubbles. Make the swarm fight a network, not a lone hull. And the twist. The cheapest defensive upgrade might be doctrine, not hardware. A smarter engagement policy can save millions per minute without changing a single missile. What we know. What we don't fast. Without killing the vibe. What we know. Defensive missiles are expensive. Magazines are limited. And saturation makes even great systems spin fast. We also know swarms can be designed to confuse sensors and decision-making, and that modern defense is as much about information as explosives. What we don't know with certainty, exact unit costs in every contract, exact loadouts on every ship, and real-world hit rates under complex EW because those vary by Navy, configuration, crew training, and scenario. So whenever you hear absolute claims like, System X is unbeatable, treat it like someone saying their car is uncrashable. Reality is messier. The useful question isn't, can it be hit? It's how fast does it run out of good options when pressure spikes? And that's why ammo economics matters. It predicts who collapses first without needing perfect data. Now we're ready for the fleet survival blueprint, but we'll earn it by finishing the economic story properly. Because the endgame isn't just buy lasers or buy more missiles. It's building a defense stack where the attacker can't force you into expensive reactions all the time. The winning fleet will have 3 traits: cheap volume defenses, resilient sensing under EW, and a kill chain designed to stay stable when the sky becomes clutter. And most importantly, it will stop treating every drone like a missile. It will treat drones like what they often are, accounting weapons. So in the next segments, we'll break down the magazine problem, the reload problem, the leaker problem, and the moment the defender's posture changes from confident to fragile. And then, we'll map the solutions into a simple survival playbook you can actually remember. But first, one more uncomfortable thought. The scariest swarm is the one that doesn't kill you. It just leaves you alive, embarrassed, and empty. Because that's when the real strike comes. The first drone doesn't feel like war. It feels like an insect in your bedroom at 3 a.m. A faint buzz you can't locate. A sound that makes your skin tighten before your brain even catches up. The radar operator hears it before he sees it, like someone tapping a spoon against glass in the distance. On the ship, nothing moves dramatically. No alarm screaming like movies. Just quiet hands, doing quiet work. Because every button pressed too early becomes a headline later. The captain doesn't say fire. Not yet. Because the real fight isn't metal versus metal, it's math versus panic. A $5,000 drone is not a threat in the traditional sense. It's a question, and the question is brutal. How much are you willing to spend to make me go away? Here's the catch. The drone doesn't need to hit you. It just needs to force you to respond. The moment you launch a $2 million interceptor, you've already lost something that never comes back fast: inventory. Ships don't carry infinite missiles. They carry a budget in physical form. And every launch is like tearing a bill in half and throwing it into the ocean. You can do it. Once, twice, 10 times. But if the swarm is designed to be cheap, it can afford to be wrong over and over. And that's when the battle turns into a slow, terrifying countdown. Not of distance, but of remaining shots. A missile isn't expensive because of the metal. It's expensive because it's a flying brain inside a flying furnace. It has to survive launch, vibration, heat, salt air, years of storage, and still work perfectly on command, like a fire extinguisher that costs as much as a house but must never fail when the kitchen explodes. It carries sensors, guidance, secure data links, a seeker that can stare into chaos and still pick out one target. And it has to do all this while moving faster than the human mind can comfortably imagine. That's why the price tag climbs, because the interceptor is built for certainty. It's engineered to be right at the worst possible moment. But drones are built for quantity. They don't need certainty. They need enough. Enough airframes, enough range, enough time, enough confusion. If one fails, another takes its place. Like throwing handfuls of sand into a machine until the gears grind. This is the uncomfortable inversion of modern combat. For decades, the defender's weapon was cheaper than the attacker's platform. You could shoot down a plane with a missile, and the exchange made sense. Now the attacker can send planes that cost less than your lunch budget for a week, and your defense is still priced like it's stopping a fighter jet. So the ship's real problem isn't, can we hit it? The problem is, if we hit everything, what happens next? Because the ocean doesn't care that your magazine is empty. It only cares whether the next wave arrives. Most people picture a drone swarm like a pack of wolves, rushing in to kill. But sometimes the swarm is more like a crowd at a concert, pressing against the doors until the security team collapses from exhaustion. Here's the twist. A swarm might not be trying to sink the ship. It might be trying to blind it. If you can force the ship to light up every sensor, shout on every frequency, launch decoys, fire warning shots, fire real shots, then you're not just attacking the hull. You're attacking the ship's attention span. Attention is finite. Track capacity is finite. Human focus is finite. Even the best combat system has a limit to how many targets it can follow with high confidence at once. And the swarm is built to live at that limit because that's where mistakes happen. This is ammo economics in disguise. You're not spending missiles on drones. You're spending time and bandwidth and certainty. And the scariest part is how quiet it looks from the outside. A drone appears, then another, then another. The sea stays calm. The sky stays empty. The ship still looks like a ship until you realize it's playing a game of hack-a-mole with million-dollar hammers. But there's a catch inside the catch. The swarm learns what you prioritize. It watches your responses. It maps your patterns. Even if it's not smart, the humans behind it are. And they only need one thing: to make your defense predictable. Predictability is expensive, because predictable defenses can be drained. What we know, modern warships do have layered defenses, soft kill and hard kill, sensors and decoys, guns and missiles, EW and doctrine. And we know that magazines are limited, reload at sea is difficult, and costs per interceptor are high compared to many drones. What we don't know, at least not publicly in perfect detail, is the exact real-world effectiveness of every layer against every class of swarm under every condition. Weather, sea state, jamming, deception, operator skill, rules of engagement, surprise, and sheer randomness. So when someone claims a swarm will always win, or a ship can easily handle it, treat that like someone claiming they can predict a thunderstorm by smelling the air. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's superstition. Reality is messier. But the direction of the problem is clear. Even if defenses work, the defender can still lose by running out. Out of missiles, out of time, out of confidence, out of good options. And that's why ammo economics matters more than cool tech. Because cool tech doesn't matter when your last interceptor leaves the rail, and the radar operator whispers, "That wasn't the main wave." Now, back to the ship. Because the next contact is closer, lower, and moving like it's not afraid of being seen. Imagine your ship's missile magazine as a wallet you can't refill at the store. You leave port with a fixed amount of money. Every time danger shows up, you can buy safety. One purchase at a time. But the prices are insane. A modern interceptor can be $1 million class weapon, sometimes more. Meanwhile, the swarm's products are cheap. Drones that cost what a used car costs, or less. So the attacker can keep shopping all day. The defender can't. This is why saturation is not just a tactical concept. It's a financial strategy wearing a camouflage jacket. The attacker is trying to force you into the worst possible spending pattern. Expensive, repeated, urgent purchases. Because urgency kills decision-making. If you hesitate, you risk impact. If you shoot, you risk depletion. And the swarm's entire purpose is to trap you between those two fears. Here's the catch. Even if your hit rate is perfect, you can still lose. If you shoot down 30 drones with 30 missiles, congratulations. You just won the battle and lost the war. Because you're now a warship with the teeth of a dolphin. And now, think of what the ship must protect. Sometimes, it's not just itself. It's a carrier, a convoy, a strait, a political promise. That means it may have to spend missiles even when it suspects the drone is just a decoy, because the cost of being wrong is catastrophic. That's the genius of cheap threats. They weaponize your responsibility. Decoys are the swarm's favorite trick because decoys impose a tax on certainty. A decoy drone might be loud on radar, exaggerated in infrared, or shaped to look just threatening enough. It doesn't need to fool the system forever. It only needs to hold attention long enough to make you allocate a track, assign a weapon, or delay a better decision. That delay is everything. In air defense, time is not measured in minutes. It's measured in heartbeats and machine cycles. So the ship begins to pay the decoy tax. It pays with radar time. It pays with operator focus. It pays with missile readiness. And sometimes it pays with a missile itself, because no commander wants to be the one who saved money and lost the ship. Now the attacker is setting the price. Not in dollars, but in decisions. Here's the twist. Once you spend your best interceptors early, you start holding back later, and the attacker knows this. The swarm can be staged like a con artist's routine. First the distraction, then the escalation, then the real move when your guard is tired. And the scariest part is that it feels rational in the moment. Every launch feels justified. Every threat feels real enough. Every decision feels like the safest choice. That's how economics becomes a weapon. It turns your best instincts into a liability over time. At some point, someone in the Combat Information Center says the sentence nobody wants to say out loud. We can't shoot all of them. Not because the ship is weak, but because the ship is finite. This is where doctrine and psychology collide. The defender wants to conserve high-end interceptors for high-end threats, like keeping your last bullet for the bear, not the raccoon. But a swarm blurs categories. A cheap drone can still carry explosives. It can still ram. It can still relay targeting data. It can still act as a spotter for something far worse. So what's high-end anymore? Is it the object or the effect? Here's the catch. If you wait to confirm every threat, you may wait too long. If you shoot everything early, you may leave yourself naked later. The swarm's value isn't just in what it does. It's in what it forces you to imagine. Now you can feel the ship's atmosphere shift. The air is cold from the conditioning, but somehow everyone's skin is warm because adrenaline heats you from the inside, a quiet fire behind the ribs. And outside, the sea stays indifferent. It rocks gently. It reflects moonlight. It doesn't care about your inventory spreadsheet. So the defender starts searching for a third path. Not shoot or don't shoot, but change the exchange rate. If the attacker's weapon is cheap, the defender must stop answering with expensive replies. That's the whole pivot. This is where layered defense becomes economic defense. You want to spend cents to defeat dollars, not the other way around. So you move down the ladder. You try soft kill first. Jam the control link, spoof the GPS, confuse the sensors, drown the drone in noise until it flies like a drunk mosquito. Then you use cheaper hard kill. Guns, rapid-fire systems, directed energy where available, or even other drones as interceptors. Because a $50,000 counter drone that kills a $5,000 drone still isn't great, but it's better than a $2 million missile. Here's the twist. The defender's economical tools aren't always reliable. Jamming can fail. Guns have range limits. Lasers have weather limits. Counter-drones have their own vulnerabilities. So you don't just need tools. You need a decision ladder, a repeatable playbook that says, first we try this, then this, then this, and only then do we spend the $1,000,000 coin. And that ladder must be fast, because the swarm's entire hope is that you hesitate, argue, or second guess. But there's a catch. The more you automate this ladder, the more you risk making it predictable. And predictability is something swarms love. So the new kill chain isn't just detect, track, engage. It's detect, decide, economize. Old school air defense was like guarding a castle with arrows. You see a threat, you shoot an arrow. The threat falls, you cheer. Simple story. But modern defense is more like running a call center during a blackout. The phones explode with calls. Every caller claims it's an emergency, and you have limited agents, limited scripts, limited patience. That's the swarm environment. It overloads the queue. So the ship's real superpower becomes triage. Not every contact deserves the same response. Some are distractions. Some are spotters. Some are the real strike. And the ship must sort them faster than the attacker can add new ones. Here's the catch. Triage is guesswork under pressure. Even with AI assistance, you're still betting lives on probabilities. This is where your channel's anti-Navy break trust style matters. You don't promise certainty. You promise clarity. You explain the logic, the constraints, the trade-offs. You show what's plausible and what's speculative without killing the drama. Because drama doesn't come from exaggeration. It comes from the truth that the defender's options are all imperfect. And now, the swarm changes shape. The contacts spread out like someone scattering coins across a table, forcing your eyes to jump from one to the next. But there's a twist. One of them isn't moving like a drone anymore. It's moving like a messenger. The most dangerous drone might be the one that carries no explosives at all. Because if a drone can see you, it can tell someone else where you are. And that someone else might be a missile launched from far away, beyond the horizon, beyond your emotional comfort zone. So now the swarm isn't just trying to drain your missiles. It's trying to pin your position, to make you radiate, to make you reveal, to make you predictable. Here's the catch. Silence is safety, but silence is also blindness. If you go dark, you may miss the real incoming threat. If you light up, you may be targeted. This is the defender's trap in its purest form. Every good choice has a cost, and the swarm is designed to make you pay it repeatedly. The CIC feels smaller now. The hum of electronics is louder. Someone's headset crackles with half-heard words. Coffee sits untouched because no one trusts their hands not to shake. And out there, the spotter drone doesn't need to win. It only needs to survive long enough to be useful. A $5K flying camera that turns your $2B warship into a glowing dot on someone else's screen. That's ammo economics again. But flipped, you are spending expensive resources to stop a cheap sensor from enabling an expensive kill. And this is where the story tightens, because now the ship has to decide, do we waste a missile on a camera, or do we risk what the camera is looking for? But there's a catch. The first wave is never the main wave. They only have a limited number of interceptors ready on the rails. And the swarm knows it. The attacker doesn't need to outsmart the ship. They need to outlast its magazine. So the ship begins to ration. It switches to cheaper layers where it can. Electronic warfare, decoys, guns. The deck guns start to bark. Short, sharp, metallic punches that echo over the water, like doors slamming in a corridor. But the twist is, the guns have to hit what they can see. And seeing is harder than it sounds. Because drones are small, low, and sometimes intentionally stupid, wobbling and drifting to confuse prediction. Meanwhile, every time the ship jams, it's also shouting, "I'm here." Every time it lights up radar, it's also painting itself as a target. Ammo economics isn't just about missiles. It's about signals. It's about exposure. It's about how much of yourself you reveal to stay alive. And now, the captain asks for the report everyone fears. How many left? Not how many drones left. How many missiles left? Because once that number drops low enough, the ship's posture changes. It stops being a hunter and becomes prey, trying to look bigger than it is. And that's the moment the attacker has been buying with cheap drones. The moment you start acting scared. When you run low on interceptors, you start seeing ghosts. Every speck on radar feels heavier. Every uncertain contact feels like it might be the one. And that uncertainty forces you into defensive decisions that look cautious until you realize caution can be manipulated. A swarm doesn't just drain ammo, it drains confidence. And confidence is what lets you hold fire when you should. Confidence is what lets you wait 2 more seconds for confirmation. Confidence is what keeps you from spending $2 million on a $5,000 question. Here's the catch. The swarm can be designed to create near misses on purpose. Not to hit you, but to make you feel how close it could have been. Like a car swerving into your lane and pulling away at the last second, leaving your hands sweaty on the steering wheel long after the danger passes. Now imagine that feeling, repeated minute after minute. That's how you get mistakes. This is where the fleet survival blueprint starts forming. You don't want every ship solving this alone. You want distributed sensors, shared tracks, layered coverage, and the ability to rotate who spends what. Because if a single ship is forced to pay the whole bill, it will eventually go bankrupt. And the attacker only needs one bankruptcy to turn a defense system into a gap. So, the story expands beyond one hull. It becomes a fleet problem, a doctrine problem, a budget problem, a technology problem. And it becomes your Season 1 promise. In the age of cheap swarms, survival is not about having the best missile. It's about having the best plan for when the missiles run out. The silence after the last launch is the loudest sound in the room. Not because everything stops, but because the options do. At that point, the ship still has tools. It still has guns. It still has jamming. It still has decoys. But everyone knows the truth. The top layer is gone. The safety net is gone. And now, the next contact on radar isn't a buzzing insect anymore. It's a weight. A shape moving with purpose. It's faster, cleaner, less random. Here's the twist. The swarm was never the main threat. The swarm was the opener. The main threat is what arrives when you're tired, loud, and low on ammo. This is why ammo economics is the heart of modern defense. The attacker isn't competing with your technology. They're competing with your logistics, your inventory, your ability to sustain. And that's the fleet survival blueprint in embryo. You must build defenses that scale with cheap threats, cheaper interceptors, more reload options, better EW doctrine, counter drone layers that don't cost a fortune, and above all, kill chains that don't collapse under saturation. But there's a catch. Building that future takes time, and the swarm exists now. So the captain makes a decision that feels ancient. Maneuver. Not just to dodge, but to force geometry, to make the attacker's targeting harder, to buy seconds without spending missiles. And those seconds, those tiny, purchased breaths, are sometimes all a ship has left. This is where fleets stop thinking one weapon, one target, and start thinking layers of cost. First layer is soft kill. Jam the link, spoof the navigation, confuse the seeker, and make the drone miss without firing a single round. Second layer is cheap hard kill. Guns, rapid-fire systems, proximity-fused rounds, anything that trades metal for metal at a sane price. Third layer is premium hard kill. Your best interceptors, saved for the targets that truly require them. But there's a catch. Soft kill can fail silently. You might think you've confused a drone, until it keeps coming. So the whole stack depends on something most people ignore: Confirmation. You need fast, did it work, feedback, or you'll waste time and suddenly be forced into the expensive layer anyway. People love the idea of guns because they feel cheap and unlimited. You can almost smell the gunpowder and hot oil, hear the staccato chatter, feel the ship shiver with each burst. But guns have a cruel requirement. You must see the target clearly enough to hit it. Drones are small, low, and often flying inside. Clutter, waves, weather, sea spray, horizon haze. At night, everything becomes a shadow. In rain, everything becomes a blur. Here's the twist. The swarm can choose the conditions. It can come when optics struggle and radar is noisy. And there's a constraint that matters more than money: time to impact. If the drone is close enough, you may not have time to try cheap first. You'll be forced into the fastest, reliable option, even if it's expensive. So the best fleets don't rely on guns alone. They build guns into a ladder. Guns as the inner fence, not the entire neighborhood's security system. But there's a catch. The swarm doesn't want to die at the fence. It wants to make you run to the fence over and over until you collapse. This is the part everyone wants to be true. A weapon that shoots at the speed of light, costs pennies per shot, and never runs out. Lasers and high-power microwave systems can change the economics because they turn ammunition into electricity. No missile can compete with the bill from the generator. But there's a catch. Weather doesn't negotiate. Fog, rain, smoke, salt spray, these aren't dramatic villains, but they can reduce effectiveness hard. And there's another constraint. You still need track quality and pointing precision. In other words, you still need the kill chain to stay stable while the sky fills up. So energy weapons aren't a cheat code. They're a new layer, powerful, but conditional. Here's the twist. Even when lasers don't destroy a drone, they can still degrade it, burn sensors, ruin control surfaces, force it to wobble. That can make your cheaper guns suddenly more effective. But there's a catch. If the swarm's goal is to blind you, then your cheap energy answer still depends on your ability to see and decide. Sometimes the cheapest defensive move is geometry. A ship isn't a stationary target. It can change bearing, speed, and aspect. Subtle moves that force the attacker's drones to replan, re-aim, and lose efficiency. You can feel it when the ship turns. A slow lean under your feet, a shift in the vibration, the horizon tilting like the world is quietly rotating around you. Here's the catch. Maneuver costs fuel, changes your formation, and can expose someone else. And the twist, if the swarm is a spotter system, maneuvering also changes the quality of the targeting data it can feed. It can turn clean coordinates into messy guesses. So fleets combine maneuver with deception, decoys, emissions control, fake signatures, and don't give them the clear picture doctrine. But there's a catch. Deception only works if you can keep the attacker uncertain longer than your own crew becomes uncertain. By hour 2, the room smells like warm plastic, stale coffee, and human stress. The screens are bright enough to dry your eyes. Your neck tightens from staring. Your mouth feels dusty. The swarm's most underrated weapon is repetition. It forces your crew to live in almost impact mode again and again. Here's the twist. Fatigue doesn't just slow reaction. It changes judgment. It makes you pick the option that ends uncertainty fastest, often the expensive option. And there's a constraint. Rules of engagement. The crew may need confirmation thresholds. They may need authorization. They may need to avoid fratricide in a crowded battle space. Every extra rule is a speed bump the swarm can exploit. So the best fleets train decision ladders until they're reflexive. Not robotic, reflexive. But there's a catch. Reflexes can become predictable, and predictability is exactly what the attacker wants. So you need doctrine that is consistent in principle, flexible in execution. Like jazz, a shared structure, but not a repeated song. A single ship running out of interceptors is bad. A fleet running out of interceptors is catastrophic. That's why the modern solution isn't just more missiles, it's shared defense. cooperative engagement, distributed sensors, and handing targets to the ship best positioned to engage cheaply. Think of it like a group of friends paying for food. If one person covers every bill, they go broke. If everyone contributes smartly, the group lasts all night. Here's the twist. When ships share tracks, the fleet can avoid duplicate shots. It can avoid panic launches. It can conserve premium interceptors by allocating the cheap layers where they fit best. But there's a catch. Shared networks can be jammed. Links can be degraded. And if the swarm includes EW, the attacker may try to isolate ships, turning a fleet into a set of lonely wallets. So fleet survival isn't just more ships. It's a network that stays useful under pressure. And now, the rehook. The swarm doesn't need to break your hull. It needs to break your coordination. If this were a strategy game, you'd have three currencies: money, ammo, and information. The swarm spends mostly money, cheap units. The defender spends ammo, finite, hard limited. And both sides fight over information. Who sees who? Who believes what? Who knows what's real? Ammo economics happens when the attacker converts money into information overload, forcing the defender to convert ammo into relief. So the defender's mission is to reverse that exchange, convert information into cheap answers, and only convert ammo into premium answers when absolutely necessary. Here's a simple ladder. Soft kill first, when possible. Cheap hard kill next. Premium missiles last. But there's a catch. The ladder must be fast enough to work at swarm speed. And the twist. Sometimes the best way to save ammo is to accept a small leak, because chasing every drone with premium missiles can create the bigger disaster later. That's the hardest leadership lesson in modern defense. You don't optimize for 0 leaks. You optimize for don't go bankrupt. 8 left. You sense the number before it's spoken. Like the room's air thickens and every breath becomes audible inside your own skull. The CIC is cold enough to raise goosebumps, yet your skin stays warm from adrenaline. And the blue-white glow of the screens dries your eyes as contacts multiply faster than your brain wants to name them. 8 interceptors sit in the ready posture for this layer, and each launch feels like a door closing behind you. One less perfect answer you can't easily replace. But the enemy doesn't need you to hit 0. They only need you to start behaving like you might. Because the moment scarcity enters the room, posture shifts. Shots become conservative. Confirmation thresholds tighten. Commanders hesitate for a single extra heartbeat. Exactly the kind of gap a swarm is built to widen. And here's the twist. The swarm isn't here to sink you. It's here to reshape your decisions. It's buying your fear at bargain price, one cheap contact at a time. Now the rhythm begins. Every minute brings another choice, another track, another moment where your mind wants to purchase certainty. But certainty is the most expensive commodity on the ocean. A launcher hatch hisses open above you, intimate and unsettling, like a pressure seal breaking in a submarine movie. A missile tears off the rail in white fire, and the roar hits your ribs before it reaches your ears, as if the ship itself exhales through flame. For a brief moment, it feels like control. Relief floods the room in silence, the kind that makes people believe the problem is smaller than it is. But relief is addictive, and addiction is expensive. Because if you spend a multi-million-dollar interceptor on a drone that costs less than a used car, you teach the attacker your pricing. And swarms love repeatable pricing. They come again and again, not to win on impact, but to win on spending, to make your best answers disappear, one launch at a time. You smell warm electronics and stale coffee, hear clipped callouts and fast confirmations, and feel a faint tremor in your fingers as the fight turns into a countdown of remaining options. Your magazine is finite, and reload isn't a button. It's a logistics event that might only happen after you've pulled away from the fight. So you can win the first wave and still lose the campaign, because the campaign continues after your inventory is gone. And somewhere out there, the clean, fast threat is waiting for the moment you've paid too much for comfort. The first stage is simple: drain. Cheap drones arrive in messy geometry. Low altitude, split bearings, uneven speeds, forcing your system to track, classify, prioritize, and then reprioritize as new returns keep pouring in. Even if every drone dies, the drain can still succeed because it drains what matters most: time, attention, and premium ammo. But this is only the setup. Next comes the haze. A handful of drones don't fly like attackers. They fly like disruption, jammers, noise nodes, and decoys that smear clean tracks into maybe. 10 is problems to admit event. You feel it in your body. Shoulders rise, jaw tightens, breathing shortens. Because uncertainty is stress, and stress pushes humans toward the fastest emotional exit. That exit is usually an expensive launch. And the twist is brutal. The swarm isn't always trying to kill the ship. It's trying to blind the ship long enough to open a window. Then the window arrives. A contact that doesn't wobble, doesn't drift, doesn't behave like bait. It moves like purpose. And if you burned your premium inventory during the drain, you may not have enough for the purpose-built strike. That's the business model. Spend pennies to make you burn gold, then show up with steel when the vault is light. To survive the cost trap, fleets build an engagement ladder, a practiced order that keeps you calm when everything is trying to make you emotional. First, you try to break the drone's ability to function without firing your rarest rounds. Disrupt links, corrupt navigation, degrade sensors, force misses through non-kinetic pressure. Second, you spend gravel, not gold, guns, and short-range layers, volume defenses designed for common threats, the tools meant to be used often without bankrupting tomorrow. Third, you spend premium only when the target truly demands it, saved for the fast, clean, lethal arrivals that would be reckless to face with anything else. But a ladder that lives in a manual is useless. The swarm moves in seconds, so the ladder must run like muscle memory, fast, confident, repeatable. And the hidden superpower is confirmation. Disruption can look like victory until it isn't. A track wobbles, drifts away, then reacquires and dives back in. So winning crews don't celebrate EW applied. They demand effect observed. Because the most expensive missile isn't the one that costs millions. It's the one fired at a target already defeated, simply because nobody verified the change. And saturation attacks verification first. That's why the ladder isn't a suggestion. It's doctrine, trained until it feels boring. Decoys are the swarm's favorite accounting trick. A decoy doesn't have to fool you forever. It only has to feel plausible long enough to trigger your premium reflex. Track assignment, weapon pairing, launch authorization. Inside the CIC, decoys don't feel like fake targets. They feel like moral pressure. If you hesitate and it's real, you lose. If you shoot and it's fake, you waste gold. And that responsibility is exactly what the attacker exploits. Attackers can be wrong 10 times and still win on the 11th. Defenders can be wrong once and lose everything. So duty becomes a spending vulnerability. You overpay for safety because the penalty for being wrong is unforgiving. That's the twist. Decoys weaponize responsibility. And your advantage, your trust cue, is clarity under constraints. You don't sell magic certainty. You explain the trade-off quickly and honestly, so the listener understands why perfect defense is a trap. But the explanation must be short, or you lose pace. So the rhythm stays tight. Dilemma, constraint, shift, again and again, like a metronome. Electronic warfare doesn't just jam signals, it jams confidence. It's like reading a street sign through rain on a windshield. Your eyes still work, but the meaning smears, and the smear makes every decision heavier. In that smear, even your best weapons can become expensive guesses. And when confidence drops, humans reach for the tool that feels most certain. Premium interceptors, because fear hates ambiguity. That's the trap inside the trap. A cheap jammer can trigger premium spending. Premium spending creates scarcity. Scarcity changes posture, and posture opens a strike window. Here's the twist. Sometimes the swarm isn't trying to sink the ship. It's trying to blind it long enough for someone else to take the shot. A weapon launched from beyond the horizon doesn't need you to be dead. It needs you to be confused at the wrong moment. Now, zoom out to the fleet. When networks degrade, ships fight alone, duplicates rise, and wasted shots multiply. And the enemy knows it, so they target links and coordination, not just hulls. The answer isn't one gadget. It's practiced degraded mode choreography, pre-trained patterns that keep cooperation alive when the spectrum turns hostile. Gold is premium interceptors. Sand is cheap drones. The future is gravel, mid-tier tools cheap enough to use often, strong enough to matter, built for the threats that show up every day. Because using gold to stop sand is insanity, and using only sand to stop sand is helplessness. But gravel only works if it's integrated into the kill chain fast enough to matter. A cheaper interceptor that arrives late is still a failure, just a cheaper one. So fleets redesign the sequence: detect, decide, economize, rapid triage that assigns the cheapest capable layer first, then escalates only when required. Here's the twist. Once the defender's response becomes cheap enough to repeat, the attacker loses leverage. Because the swarm's power is repeatability. If you can repeat your defense without going broke, the swarm's economics collapses. You still need premium for the rare, clean, lethal arrivals. But the only way premium stays available is if you stop spending it on noise. That's ammo economics in one line. Don't spend rare answers on common questions. A single ship can be drained. A fleet can be bankrupted. So survival becomes cooperative. Distributed sensing, shared tracks, cooperative engagement, and specialization. Some nodes see, some jam, some shoot cheaply, some hold premium reserve. But the swarm often targets the network itself, because isolation resurrects waste. If links degrade, each ship becomes a lonely wallet again. Duplicate engagements rise, confirmation drops, premium reflex returns. And that's the twist. The swarm's real target might be coordination, not hull. So fleets train degraded mode as a primary skill, not an emergency afterthought. Fallback formations, silent rules, pre-agreed thresholds. So cooperation survives without perfect data. Yes, extra rules can slow the ladder. But rules that prevent waste are faster than panic, because panic is pure delay disguised as action. The crew that rehearses decisions doesn't debate under stress, and debate is exactly what the swarm buys with cheap noise. The most dangerous outcome isn't always hit and sunk. It's alive but empty, a ship that survives the swarm by spending everything, then withdraws to reload, leaving gaps the enemy exploits elsewhere. And that's the catch. Depletion scales. Drain 3 escorts, and you can reshape a region without sinking a single hull, because control is about presence, not wreckage. Here's the twist. A swarm can deny space through accounting, forcing defensive burns so fleets retreat. That's why logistics becomes part of combat design: magazine depth, resupply safety, at-sea replenishment, and weapons that trade electricity or cheap rounds for shots. None of that changes overnight. But doctrine can change faster than hardware. A disciplined ladder, tighter confirmation, and better fleet choreography can reduce premium waste today, even before next-gen systems arrive. Now you can see what it looks like when the attacker's hustle starts to fail. A decoy arrives and doesn't trigger a gold purchase. Noise spikes, but the fleet keeps shared awareness alive through practiced degraded mode choreography. A leaker pushes into the inner layer and gets caught with cheap hard kill without panic launching premium. But the attacker won't stop, because when the drain stops draining, escalation is the only remaining play. They throw one clean, fast, terrifying contact into the mix, because fear is the most reliable currency on Earth. Here's the twist. Victory isn't never feel fear. It's don't let fear set prices. So, the fleet holds the ladder. Disrupt and confirm. Spend gravel. Save gold for the gold-level threat. And that's how the mission is accomplished. Not with a fireball, but with a principle that stays true tomorrow. The room goes strangely quiet for half a second, like everyone is listening for the ocean itself to speak. Then a new contact appears. Fast, clean, committed, and it doesn't move like bait or noise. It moves like a decision already made. There's a hard constraint sitting behind every heartbeat. Premium interceptors are not infinite, and the ship can't afford to spend them on uncertainty anymore. But something else is true, and it's worse. This is the moment the attacker has been saving for, the moment that punishes every earlier comfort shot. So the fleet holds the ladder. They shape the fight first, confirm what changes, and only then commit the rarest response, because now it's not buying relief, it's buying survival. And you can feel the difference in the CIC. Less panic, more purpose, as if the entire ship just stopped flinching at feints. In swarm warfare, track faded is not a victory sentence. A track can fade because it died, because it ducked into clutter, because a jammer smeared the picture, or because your own attention shifted. That's why the winning word is confirmed. Confirmed means someone checked the behavior, verified the effect, and didn't let hope replace evidence. But there's a catch. Confirmation is exactly what saturation tries to steal first. So fleets build confirmation as a reflex. Short callouts, clear ownership, no celebration until outcomes are verified, and no duplicate spending on a problem already solved. Here's the twist. The most expensive missile isn't the one that costs millions. It's the one fired because nobody trusted the result of the cheaper layer. And once you realize that, you start fighting the real war, the war against waste. When the drain stops draining, the attacker tries to restart it with fear. A decoy surges in loud and aggressive. A jammer spikes the spectrum, and a low-altitude cluster spreads across bearings to pull your eyes apart. They're not aiming at your hull yet, they're aiming at your instincts. But there's a catch. The fleet has learned to see roles, not shapes. The loud ones get managed, not worshipped. The disruptors get suppressed. And anything that enables the next strike wave gets prioritized before it can buy time for something worse. Here's the twist. The attacker's advantage was never better hardware. It was better economics. So once the defender refuses bad trades, the attacker loses leverage, even if the sky is still crowded with threats. And that's the moment the swarm stops feeling like a monster and starts feeling like a bill the attacker can't afford forever. Perfect defense is a fantasy. Not because ships are weak, but because reality is messy. Weather, clutter, fatigue, and the simple fact that humans aren't machines. So the real goal is not nothing gets through. The real goal is don't collapse. Because there's a catch. Chasing perfection can bankrupt you. If every contact triggers the premium reflex, you might win the first minute and lose the next hour, alive but empty. Forced to withdraw while the enemy gains space elsewhere is less than #0. 2 is greater than. Here's the twist. Sustained capability is more intimidating than short-term heroism. A fleet that remains armed, coordinated, and calm after the first wave controls the map, not just the moment. That's what swarms are really testing. Whether your defense can be repeated tomorrow without falling apart today. If you want the whole episode reduced to 3 rules, it's this. First, disrupt before you destroy whenever you can, because a miss is cheaper than a kill. Second, spend the everyday tools before the rare tools, because the rare tools are reserved for rare threats. Third, protect the ability to see and decide, because once perception collapses, every shot becomes a guess, and guesses are where ships and budgets disappear. But there's a catch. Rules that live in a briefing slide don't survive the first swarm. So fleets train the rules until they become boring, automatic, and fast enough to keep pace with targets that don't wait for discussion. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Survival often sounds like discipline, not drama. So we learned about what saturation does to layered defense, what disruption does to certainty. And this documentary shows the engine underneath both. The enemy can win without sinking you by forcing you into a spending pattern you can't sustain. But there's a catch. Once you understand the engine, you can build a counter-engine, a ladder that escalates only when required, confirmation discipline that prevents double paying for the same outcome, fleet choreography that keeps ships from fighting alone when the spectrum gets hostile. Here's the twist. This isn't just drone warfare. It's economics and information acting like weapons, shaping outcomes before steel ever meets steel. Your advantage is different. One fast what we know and what we don't moment that keeps credibility high without slowing the pace. You don't need perfect numbers to understand the direction of the trade. Cheap threats that force premium spending can create strategic wins even when tactically they fail to land hits. A $5,000 drone doesn't need to be lethal to be powerful. It only needs to force the defender into a lethal spending habit. That habit is the cost trap. Drain your magazine with cheap pressure. Smear your picture with disruption. Isolate your ships by attacking coordination. Then strike when your posture shifts. But there's a catch. The trap only works if the defender keeps paying the wrong prices. So the counter is brutally clear. Cheap layers first, verified outcomes, shared burden, and premium reserved for premium danger. Once the defender's response becomes repeatable, the attacker's cheapest strategy becomes a bad investment. And when the enemy's best plan turns into a bad investment, the war starts bending in your direction. If you remember one sentence from this documentary, make it this: the fight isn't only about destroying drones. It's about protecting the fleet's ability to keep answering threats without going broke in missiles, attention, and options. Because there's a catch. The sea is big, and attacks can be repeated. So the winning fleet isn't the one that looks unstoppable for 10 minutes. It's the one that stays capable after the 10th wave, the one that still has premium answers available when the truly lethal contact finally arrives. Here's the twist. Discipline doesn't make you passive. It makes you dangerous at the right moments. And that's how this ends. Not with fireworks, but with a mindset that keeps working when the lights go out and the picture gets ugly. Next episode, we stop describing the trap and start building the blueprint. We map what a fleet looks like when it's designed not to be drained. Cheap volume defense that scales, sensing that stays usable under disruption, engagement that stays distributed when links degrade, and logistics, treated as part of combat instead of an afterthought. But no single upgrade saves anyone. It's a stack, a choreography, a new kill chain that stays stable when the sky turns into a spreadsheet of threats. And here's the turnaround. The future fleet may look less like a few superships and more like a team of specialized nodes. Some that see, some that jam, some that shoot cheaply, and some that hold the premium reserve for the rare moment it's truly needed. Because the real victory isn't shooting down drones. The real victory is making the enemy's cheapest strategy too expensive to keep using.